Hello, and it's that time again, ladies and gentlemen. It is Thursday, and that means it's the show on sportsnetusa.net. And we're going to talk community college athletics for the next 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 45 to 60 minutes. And it's going to be an enjoyable show today. We're going to cross state lines, not just community college in California, but we're going to travel to Arizona today. My name is Corey Neyland. Up top is Mark Pavlovich. Down below, as you get to see the fresh Ed Ford for the first, second, maybe the third time on the air with us today. Usually he's behind the scenes. And we are happy to be joined by Eastern Arizona College Director of Athletics, Division Chair of Health and Physical Education. That's one job. Second job, President of the Arizona Community College Athletic Conference. Third job used to be head coach of Eastern Arizona College baseball, but now he just stays at two jobs. Jim Bagnall, thank you very much for joining us today. We've been excited to talk to someone from Arizona for a long time now. We're huge softball fans, and we just want to talk everything else Arizona. Coach, AD, President, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Corey. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here.
All right, and we just start things off because we want to know about community college athletics in Arizona. We want to know about you as well. So Mark Pavlovich always gets the first question to start us off on where we're going. So Mark, take it away.
Well, Jim, first of all, thanks for being on the show. And Corey, Ed, we're always lucky because it seems like people that have risen up on the community college level in sports have a heritage or a pedigree. And of course, if you don't know about Jim, national champion, Arizona, University of Arizona, I believe, 1980 baseball player, and then he went on to play in the pros. So, Jim, a little background about yourself because our guests come on and hopefully people know about them, but a lot of people don't, especially here in California. So a little background to how you got where you are today.
Sure. I'm born and raised a native of Tucson, Arizona. Obviously, that's where the University of Arizona is. Um, Finished high school and got an opportunity to play at Arizona for 4 years. My second year, my sophomore year, we won a national championship in 1980. I finished up playing there, played 1 year of professional ball with Kansas City Royals. That's about as long as it took them to understand that I'm not ready to play professional baseball. So I did that, and then fortunately got into coaching pretty quickly after that and went out to Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia for 5 years to coach for a summer coach I had. And I was there for 5 years and then got a great opportunity to go to the University of Georgia for the next 6.5 years. In our first year at the University of Georgia in 1990, we won the national championship in baseball. When I left there, I had an opportunity to come back to Arizona. Eastern Arizona College had a baseball program up through the early 80s, 81, maybe about 81, dropped the program, and I came back, and in 96, we started 96, 97. They brought the program back, and then I was the head coach at the time then. So I've been here since then, coached up to 2.5 years ago, been the athletic director for over 20 years and division chair, and took over the conference presidency for this year. I've been in and out of the conference as president, officer, and stuff like that. Did an awful lot in the WSFL, which was an offshoot of our football programs. Over the years, was president of that until that all was taken apart by teams dropping out. So I'm now here 25 years at Eastern Arizona College.
And in your 25 years, I mean, you were speaking with Ed earlier, right before the show started, about it's a good athletic program at Eastern Arizona and a good athletic conference. What would you say is the biggest reason why, or one of the big reasons why Eastern Arizona College is one of the premier colleges in Arizona, and when you say Arizona, the state and the country?
Well, I would say a couple of things. I think we have a wonderful college. It's a small town. We're in Thatcher, Arizona, which is surrounded by Safford and Pima, and probably the whole area there is maybe about 28,000 people. But it's a small community. It is a community. I think when students come here, they enjoy the experience. It's a nice college setting, and they enjoy that academically. And then I think we've done a lot to put put a lot of resources into our programs to allow them to be successful with scholarships and with money for them to travel. And our facilities are good. We just renovated our gym, and it's really nice now with new locker rooms and everything like that. So we're giving our coaches and programs a chance to be successful with the resources, and that's allowed them to be successful. And we have had success over the years with our programs, and they've had opportunities to get to nationals and have that experience there too. So that's probably the reasons there.
You know, Corey, my nephew, my grandnephew, Thatcher, is going to be real excited to know that there was a city named after him, or he was named after a city, except that East Arizona College is the oldest, if I'm not wrong here, Jim, is the oldest community college in Arizona. So, I mean, were you the first? That I couldn't figure out. Were you the first community college in Arizona, and then the community college grew across the state of Arizona for them
Yes.
as students needed them?
Yes.
And,
We were the first one. Starting with Gila Academy, and we've been here in existence for over 130 years. We were the first ones, and shortly after us would have been Phoenix College. And then the other ones started to grow from there. Probably the younger ones are probably Pima and maybe Yavapai. But we were the first one, oldest one in the state.
And I've got to follow up with something on that, Corey, too, because Jim, I noticed that your student body at your community college is basically 64% to 65% female to 30 to 35% male now. Has that always been the trend at East Arizona College, or is it something that's changed over the years?
No, I think it's been slightly tipped towards the female percentages and stuff like that, but not to that extent. Not to that extent. For us, as far as percentages, enrollments, everybody's struggling with enrollments these days because of COVID and everything like that. But up to a couple of years ago, we also had a football program with over 100 student athletes there on that program. So that may have tipped those numbers a little bit once that program went away.
Okay.
And Ed, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just, since you mentioned football, Jim, that was a tough decision. Could you give us a little more background as to what exactly transpired to where the Arizona schools decided to drop football from their programs?
Sure. Now that was after the fall of 18 was our last fall. Basically what happened is the four Maricopa schools, that was Glendale, Scottsdale, Mesa, and Phoenix College, decided that was going to be their last fall. For varying reasons, whether it was money, whether it was, and probably was money, but varying reasons why they were not going to be able to move forward. And that was almost half of our schools that were in the Western States Football League. Once they moved forward and did that, Pima Community College down in Tucson followed suit. And so that was the other ones. And that just left us, Arizona Western, New Mexico Military, and Snow College out of Utah left. And then shortly after that, Arizona Western decided to drop their program. So we're really getting left with, and I take that back, New Mexico Military had left our conference a couple of years earlier and moved over into Texas, but we were looking to bring them back in based on this. And so we really left us with us and Snow College. And we just didn't feel like we could afford to do that. It was going to require us to play games in Texas and wherever else we could find games, as close as we could get to find games. And it was just probably going to be not feasible for us to continue. So we were virtually the last one to drop. Snow College still has their football program, and they play across the country trying to find games. It's not ideal, but they've got a long history of football, and they want to keep it going. So that's pretty much how it was. A kind of a domino effect. Started with Maricopa County. When they dropped, that was a big hit, and then Pima followed shortly after that.
And talking about that, I have two questions. The first is before football was dropped and others, and we'll get into other sports as well. What were the travel logistics like when you were going to games? Was it just strictly long bus rides for those out of state schools, or?
Actually, it was pretty good when I first got here. There was a couple other schools. Dixie College out of St. George was in the league, and Ricks College up in Rexburg, Idaho, were in the league. So that added some more travel to us. But really, our travel was for us and for most schools. Maricopa County's 3 hours away. Tucson's 2 hours away. 5.5 hours away to get across the state to go to Arizona Western, about the same to go to New Mexico Military. The longer one was 12 hours or so, 12, 14 hours to get to Ephraim to play Snow College. So that was the long trip. But for the most part, the rest of them were pretty, those basically are day trips or a split up overnight. So they weren't horrible. They were harder when I first got here because Rexburg, I don't even know how many hours that was. That had to be an 18, 20-hour trip there. And in the history of our program, when some of these other teams weren't in it, New Mexico Military and Pima, back before I got there, they were making trips to Kansas and into Texas and stuff like that to pick up games. So they did have bigger travel, but it was pretty manageable after we got to the point of just having snow, the Arizona schools and New Mexico Military.
Okay, and the second part of the question is, did it make the student athletes, did it seem like for them that they were like, okay, this isn't simply a community college thinking, this is like we're traveling like, maybe 4 year big time colleges that we get to travel across state lines and play really good competition?
Yeah, I mean, we try to treat all of our programs. We try to approach them like we're a 4 year Division One program as far as our expectations and how we want to travel, and we're going to do it what we can afford, which is going to be buses, obviously. But we're going to try to treat our student athletes very, very well and treat them special, like they're in a 4 year program, basically to prepare them to go to a 4 year program. That's the big thing. I mean, they come here. Community college for athletics is for the most part, it's an intermediary step. They're here to get to the next place. And that's unlike the 4 year schools don't deal with that. 2 year schools, they're here to get prepared to go to the next step. So we're going to treat them academically and support with that and how we travel and how we live on campus and everything like that. Treat them as well as we can to prepare them for the next step. And so they're ready to make that step to the 4 year programs.
Jim, we look at your football program. I went back and looked through the records, and for anybody that says, oh, well, they decided to stop football because it wasn't as successful. You had successful program in football, and the thing that I have to think would be the toughest decision when you decided in 2018 that it was time to call it quits, you also gave student athletes financial support in scholarships. And I know when the football program went away, you continued the scholarships. And was that your call, or did you have to go to the college or the board to say, this is what we want to do for our student athletes?
No, it was a mutual thing. We sat down and talked about it and said, that's the right thing to do. We're going to stop the program right at the end of the fall of 2018. And we're going to allow any one of our student athletes that wants to continue through the spring and through the next year. We're going to keep them on scholarship to make sure they can finish their degree. We had a lot get placed right after the year. They got placed in other 2 year colleges. Someone moved on to 4 year situations, and we had some stay through the spring. Maybe a dozen or so, and we helped them get through the spring. And the next year, I think we had one young man that wanted to finish up and finish his second year, and we took care of that. But the decision was a mutual between the president and I to say that's the right thing to do, and give them the opportunity to finish their degree and finish what they started. And you're right, we had a very successful program. The previous 16 years, our coach John O'Mara had done a wonderful job. And unfortunately, probably the hardest thing to decide in 2018 is we just came off of winning the Western States Football Conference. We won the league, and that was the first time we'd ever done that. But we'd been to a bowl game the previous 3 years, that year and the previous 2 years, and been to 5 or 6 overall during his tenure. So things were going pretty well from a success standpoint on the field.
And in California, football, seems like an amount of attention rather than the other sports. When the football was dropped, and I'll speak to you as the president of the ACCAC, do other schools feel and other pro sport programs feel that they're now going to get more recognition and more notoriety than funding that football now that football's not there?
I think that's possible that, there's more focus on the other sports now. I don't know, to be honest with you, the funding, I don't think it was a slam dunk in most of the schools that the funding just went to the other sports. Because if truly in Maricopa County, if there are concerns, and in Pima, if they're monetary, then it would not really make a whole lot of sense to take the money you were spending there and then just spread it out over the other sports. But I think that's what a lot of people thought might happen, and I don't think it happened very much at all. I think they saved their money. They may have done it in scholarships, which would have really been helpful for our students to try to bump up scholarships and help people out. But I think the focus, football is a big focal point in the fall, and it took a lot of that focus off of football, and now what we lost was fall sports. Our fall, we don't have anything. We have volleyball, and we have a very, very good volleyball program, but our fall is really quiet now because we don't have football. And until basketball season starts in November, then it picks up there, and then we've got full spring with baseball, softball, tennis, and golf. But, without having football, now other schools in our conference have soccer in the fall. That fills it. But football was a big deal. It was a big deal here as far as people following, coming to the games, and long history of that. So,
let's stick with what Corey just brought up, Jim, because I sort of looked at it too and said, okay, what were the political ramifications of the football program closing? Were there people or alumni or somebody else that stepped up and said, well, gee, if football's going away, we're going to replace it with, or gee, if we don't have that football program, what other program should we possibly get rid of? Was there that dilemma that was thrown into your lap when football disappeared, or did everybody just sort of said, okay, and it went away?
It pretty much, the decision was we can't move forward with it because of financially it will be too tough because of the teams we'd have to play. And the immediate thing wasn't okay, what do we replace football with? What do we do? How do we, and there's been that conversation, but it hasn't been a rush to fill it. If I were to be wise about it, considering our conference and the interest around here, maybe it's soccer. Men and women soccer bring in, and they're a fall sport, and they take the place of where football was and gives us somebody to play in our stadium and a reason for our grass to be there. But it wasn't a rush to say we're going to use that and we're going to bring other sports in and stuff like that. Those are all to me, they're all on the horizon to consider. But it's not a rush to think about bringing those in right now. It wasn't that. It was more of let's regroup, see what we can do with our other sports, and let's put focus on them, continually strengthening them and our focus there, and go from there.
The general structure of your conference, you have a number of schools that play, let's say, excluding football now, of course, but have a full menu, so to speak, of sports. And then you have some smaller colleges that are only maybe participating in 3 or 4 or 5 sports. And we have the same sort of thing here in California. There are some community colleges that only field 5 or 6 teams. But what I noticed was kind of unique that some of the schools, Cochise, for instance, has a rodeo squad, and they have both a men's and women's rodeo team. And you don't see a lot of rodeo teams in community colleges throughout the United States.
No, you don't. In fact, back in the day, long before me, we had rodeo. I think they still have it at Central Arizona College, still has rodeo. But Cochise does have a very good rodeo program, and it's not a recognized NJCAA sport per se, because they work under their own organization, and you really don't hear much about them because it doesn't come across in the NJCAA as a sport. But They're there. There are probably more of them up in the north of us and Montana, Wyoming, and the Northwest and stuff like that. But obviously not much in Arizona. Maybe got to go into New Mexico and up into Colorado for any of that stuff. They're a unique breed of athlete. But yeah, we do have some schools that only have a handful of sports. Coconino Community College is coming in next year. They're located in Flagstaff, and they're going to run cross country only. Cross country is very popular and very strong up in the high schools up there. They're going to do that. We have Tohono O'odham, which is down south of Tucson on the Indian Reservation. They had basketball up till a year or so ago, and now they will just run cross country there. So they're some of the ones that just have a few sports as far as that go. And then you go all the way up to Pima, Mesa, Glendale, Phoenix, where they will have 10, 12 sports, including big ones, including track and field, cross country, along with all the traditional ones: soccer, volleyball, basketball, baseball, softball. So it's just a matter of what people can maybe afford, or what their interest area, what their facilities are. We've got a couple schools in Phoenix area that don't have basketball and volleyball because they don't have gyms. They don't have a gym on campus. So it'd be nice if they did. It would add a few more teams into our league, but they don't. Gateway and Paradise Valley do not have gyms, so they don't have volleyball and basketball.
When we were all speaking right before we actually started streaming the show, I was mentioning that here at SportsNetUSA.net, we're big softball fans and have been following what happens in your conference in softball, and it's the same thing in baseball. It's interesting that you have Division 1 teams. You're a Division 1 team, and then you have Division 2 teams like, as you mentioned,
Maricopa schools.
Maricopa schools.
Maricopa schools are all Division 2 for the most part.
All Division 2. How is that exactly decided upon? What are the benchmarks to make a certain team a Division 2 team and a certain other team, as your team is, a Division 1 team?
The basically Division 1 and Division 2 is not what you would think of at the four-year level. It's not. It has nothing to do with that. It purely has to do with the funding source. Division 1s are allowed to give tuition, room, board, books, meals. They can give all that. Division 2 is only allowed to give tuition and books. So that's why you tend to see that more in a metro area of 5 or 6 million people, whatever's in the Phoenix area there. Those schools are just giving waivers for tuition and books at best. But then a lot of their students can come from that area, living at home and stuff like that. So you find more of that in the metro area. And in the rural areas, be very difficult to do that because just what we're drawing from population base, what people would have to do to move, to live in a dorm, to buy a meal ticket and stuff like that. It wouldn't be so feasible for them. But that's the only distinction. It's the amount of money you can give a student athlete based on your Division 1 or Division 2 status. It has nothing to do with competition. Because I will tell you, we have Division 2 programs that give only tuition and books, and we talked about Phoenix College softball, and they'll win our league every year. They'll be the best team in the league, and all they're given is tuition and book scholarships, and drawing from that area there in the metro area. So it's not really that distinction. It really has to do with what they can afford or what they want to spend on it. And we used to all be Division 1 back in the day, all the way across the board. And then it started to creep in a little bit when Division 2 became more of a thing. And it really started with Phoenix College. They started it in all their sports, and then it just gravitated through Maricopa County to all of them, that they're all Division 2 in all sports, except for Mesa is Division 1 in what they do in men's basketball, and South Mountain is Division 1 in what they do in baseball. Pima across the board down in Tucson is Division 1 pretty much across the board in all their sports. And then all the rurals are Division 1.
And is that based on what the NJCAA does?
Yeah, they have 3 levels. They have a Division 1 max scholarships. Division 1 or 2 is tuition and books, then Division III, they actually have a Division III, which is no scholarships whatsoever. So it allows teams and programs to kind of find a niche where they can fit in and they feel like they can be more competitive because of their funding source. So if I don't feel like I can do much more than tuition and books, at least I'm competing against other schools that are doing the same thing. And so even though our conference, the ACCAC conference, has 16 members of it, and we compete for a conference championship, whether we're Division I or Division II, when we break off, we go into regions. And region one will break off into a Division I level and a Division II level. They will go into postseason play in region play, which will advance to possibly districts and then their own national tournaments. So Phoenix College is not competing against Eastern Arizona College or Central Arizona College for a national championship. They're competing against all other like-funded schools in Division II. And so that's where it breaks off and goes differently. And we're kind of a unique situation because I don't know how many other places have the combination within their conference that they play everybody and everything like that. We're kind of unique in that. And it gets confusing because all Arizona schools are in the ACCAC, but they're also all in Region 1. So it gets confusing when people say, well, what region? What's region? What's ACC? It really is ACCAC is the conference, and we compete for a conference championship as a whole. And then we break off into region tournaments and compete for national championship opportunities from there based on Division I and Division II.
Okay.
So you got all that straight, Ed?
Yeah, I'm glad you explained it because I really, I was just taking a wild guess at how it was structured, and I thought it was more towards, if you take four-year universities, Division I, Division II. Yep. So now we know what
it's strictly scholarship funding. That's what it is. And like I said, kudos to Division IIs because we got some very, very good Division IIs that are our best teams in the conference year in and year out. And they've had opportunities to go on to national tournaments, and we've won national championships in Division II. Baseball with Mesa and volleyball with Glendale and Scottsdale, and it's just and Phoenix College and softball, and they've been very, very successful. Alongside with the ones on the Division I side that have done very well in baseball. Central a year ago, and Yavapai 3 or 4 years ago, and so we've it's kind of a unique situation. But again, Division I, Division II is strictly based on scholarships availability.
And you speak of the scholarships and on campus. There's in Eastern Arizona, you have on-campus housing for the student athletes. Is that one of the ways that you talked in the beginning that your campus is more of a close-knit family atmosphere, and that's a way to really bring out excellence in your student athletes?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we really, really work hard, and we have a new president as of 3 years ago, and they're really, really looking at student engagement and what we can do on campus for a student life situation, and having them on campus and having them walk to classes, and eating in our cafe and stuff like that, and coming down to events, whether it's fine arts events, which we're really, really known also for our fine arts. Music and theater and stuff like that. Coming to those events, being able to come to a basketball game, a volleyball game, baseball, softball, whatever it is, just the atmosphere on campus is really kind of neat, and we really, really try to sell that. And all the activities we do with student activities, to have things on campus to give students something to do and something to make it more of a campus setting. I can't imagine, I've never been in a situation like Maricopa County or Pima where their kids go home every night to an apartment or go home to their homes, and you wouldn't see them again until maybe 1 o'clock the next day getting ready for practice. I mean, we'll see our kids. I mean, I go through campus. I see our athletes in the cafe. I see them walking through campus going to class. I see them in buildings administratively. So we see them all the time. We see them on the weekends. We see them at games. Whereas in a setting where they don't live on campus, you would only see them, as a coach, I'd only see them when they came to practice and games.
Jim,
Yeah.
let's it's interesting that you say that, because when I think about Arizona and I think about sports, I think about the Division I schools, and being big softball fans as we are here, and we do a lot of softball on sportsnetusa.net. Ed Ford can tell you that many times during the softball season, we like to go see where California talent goes. And as we know, University of Arizona, Arizona State, you just look at them, their softball rosters are filled with Californians. So I need to know the background of your student body. Are we looking at basically locals that live in your vicinity, or do you get a lot of out-of-state traffic that comes in because what you offer student athletes into your program?
That's a good question. I mean, our focus in recruiting in all of our programs is to start locally, work Arizona-wide, work Western states, go from there. Locally, we're going to draw in a few local athletes once in a while that can compete in our conference and stuff like that. And that's great because it just means a lot to the community, pride to have somebody do well. And it varies on what sport it is. We've probably had more local student athletes in volleyball. Volleyball is a real big sport in the valley here, in our valley here, through the high schools and on up. So we've probably had more local talent there that have come through. Softball a little bit, baseball a little bit. Other than that, most of them are going outside of not only Arizona, but then outside into the Western United States. And then we have, because we have like our men's basketball team will have more guys that come from Indiana, Michigan area there. It's just kind of a recruiting, and you understand recruiting, it goes in ebbs and flows, that you may have a really nice pocket of places where you can get athletes from, and then sometimes that kind of dries up and you're looking for another area to go. We do have a lot of athletes, a handful of athletes, I'd say, from California. Our softball team tends to dip into California for student athletes over there. Not so much in our other couple of sports. Softball is probably the biggest one there. I don't know anybody else that really goes into California. Most of it, and the other thing was there's a funding thing called the Western Undergraduate Exchange Program with all the Western states. And if you come there to Eastern Arizona College or any school in Arizona, your tuition is only 150% of in-state tuition. You're not paying the $4,000 or $5,000 for out-of-state tuition if you come from those places. So there's another reason to recruit out of those areas. Go into Washington, Oregon, go up into Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, to branch off in there, Texas, because we get that break, and which means our scholarships go further. And if we go get somebody from Indiana or Michigan, it's going to cost us almost a double scholarship to go get that kid. Now we package financial aid and other things and stuff like that, but it costs us more to do that. So our recruiting tends to be based on where we can get the most bang for our buck and find the best players, obviously, that fit into our programs.
And when you talk about those scholarships along with let's say on the campus housing, how is that working and the recruiting working during this time of COVID?
Actually, it's going okay. And to be honest with you, our programs are still looking to sign players and stuff like that. I think the challenge right now with COVID is now with basketball, volleyball, is what happened with baseball, softball, tennis, and golf last year. Is those individuals were given a free year. That year didn't count for them last spring. So it's from a recruiting standpoint. For example, our baseball program, we brought back 6 or 7 of what were sophomores looking to move on last year, came back for a third year. So that's been kind of nice. We've got juniors, if you want to say that. They're in their third year in our programs, and they know the ropes and they know what they're doing. So it's kind of nice recruiting those people. Now we'll have those same questions moving forward with volleyball and basketball, because this year basically doesn't count for them. And moving forward, they could come back. So, recruiting wise, it's a matter of, do you bring them back for a third year? Are they far enough along that we can get them placed in a 4-year program and give them 3 years at a 4-year program. It all depends on the individual. So from a recruiting standpoint, I don't think it's really, we don't do a lot of bringing kids on campus and stuff like that because of where we're located and the cost to do that. So I think it's virtual recruiting, and I think that's going okay because I see that we're signing people and we're getting out to see them on film and recommendations, and they've been signing them since November, and they still come through to fill our holes for next year.
I've got one more question. Now, have you got any feedback on that extra year? Is it helping? Do you find it's helping maybe the student athletes academically getting that extra year and feeling a little bit more at ease or less stress?
Well, it can help them academically, and it can hurt them academically. If they're a good student, it's kind of hard because they run out of what else they need. And it probably the more concern is where they're going from here. The Division I level has the percentage towards a graduating degree when you get there. After 2 years, you have to be 40% towards a degree. After 3 years, you got to be 60% to a degree. So if you sit here for 3 years, it might be a little bit of a challenge to get 60% towards a 4-year degree being here when you've got your AA, and there's not too many more classes that you can take on that. So that's been probably a bigger issue for those possible Division I folks moving on because of the percentage towards degrees at the Division I level. Other than that, yeah, there are some that can certainly benefit from a third year, that they're not ready, they're not ready to graduate and they need another year to develop and mature and stuff like that. So that's a benefit there. There's a whole domino effect with this whole free year thing, because not only do our folks get a free year, but the 4-year school guys get a free year too. So you may have somebody that was graduating last spring that was ready to go to a 4-year school, but to replace that senior who is going to be graduating, and then he gets another year and stays. Now all of a sudden, do I go? Do I redshirt? Do I stay another year at the 2-year level? I know instances where you got a really good student, they graduated in 2 years, and they're ready to go to a 4-year, and they get log jammed there, and that they got to make a decision. And I think they'll make the decision probably to keep going, but then you got to fund that. I mean, just because for us, just because we brought 6 or 7 people back, the NJCA lifted the number of scholarships we could offer. They didn't give us any more money to give that scholarship money. They just lifted the number we could have on scholarship. So now, fortunately, it wasn't a lot for us, but our administration was willing to help us with that if those students came back, knowing that we were going to be over our scholarship if we did that, because we had already worked to replace those folks, and now we got them wanting to come back. We want to do right by the student and not say, sorry, you got to go. We'll just have to find you a place. So those ones that came back, we were able to work into a funding source to take care of that. And as it all attrition and everything worked out, it wasn't as high a dollar figure as we had originally thought, and it worked out okay. But yeah, it's such a domino effect. We're talking about our kids. We're talking about the 4-year level kids. The ones that got most affected by this COVID are the high school kids. I mean, they're coming out of high school with the idea they're going to a 4-year college. They don't have the choice to go back to high school to play another year. They don't have that choice to play another year of high school. They got to move, and now they're moving. And what they thought was, the depth chart when they got recruited has changed a little bit, because those 4-year guys, 2-year guys are staying where they're at, and they're going to play, because that's how it's going to work. So it's been really kind of an interesting dynamic, and I think it'll work out. Somewhere along the way, it's got to work itself out. We can't keep bringing kids back. I mean, theoretically, our spring sports, they got a free year last year. So if I was a freshman 3 years ago, last year didn't count. This year doesn't count in the NJCAA. So I could come back for a 4th year. Now, God, I hope we don't have anybody do that, because I don't think that benefits them. But, unless their idea is they're not going to move on and they just want to play another year, obviously that would be okay. But if they're really trying to move on, we're trying to do the best by them and making sure they're prepared to do that.
I've seen some places where some people think that might be because of, as you talk about, Jim, the log jam, and the high school kids are coming out and they think, well, I was going to go to wherever Kansas State, and the depth chart, as you said, has really not changed. Do you think this is going to help community colleges where some of these athletes will decide, well, I'm not going to get into this four-year school and play like I wanted to? Do you think
I
perhaps
think
some
that's a good
might
point.
pick community colleges for a year?
I think that's a good point, Ed. I think that's a real possibility that, if your goal is coming out of high school to find a place where you can play. I mean, and that's no different than our young people here when we're trying to find them a place to go to four-year school. I mean, they all want to go Division One. Every kid will say, "I want to go Division One." Now, not all of them can do that. Not all of them can do that from an academic standpoint all the time, and not all of them fit in a Division One. They're not going to play, and so finding the right niche of where to go. So if I find out there's a log jam coming out of high school where I thought I was going to go to school, that may be an option to go to a two-year school and get playing time in, and then be able to move over after maybe that year and be in a better position to earn a position at the four-year college and stuff like that. But I think that sounds really good. But I tell you what, I'm not sure what I had done. I was a Tucson boy, and all I wanted to do was go to the University of Arizona. And if COVID would have hit my senior year, and somebody said, well, maybe you don't go to Arizona, you do something different, I may not have done that. I might have said, well, I'll go and I'll sit a year, because that's where I want to be. And that's a big case for a lot of young people. That's the school they want to be at, and they're going to go there anyway. So it may work to a benefit there, but maybe not everybody would take advantage of that. I mean, we'd sure like to see them. We'd sure like to have them available to come here, that they were a D1 or D2 quality, very good prospect, and I decided I want to go somewhere where I can play, and I'm contacting Eastern Arizona College. We would certainly take that phone call in a heartbeat.
Jim, you talk about family atmosphere, and the one part of the family we haven't discussed are the coaching staffs at East Arizona College, because you talk about these high school players come in, but you're a former coach. You've got players that are coming back that they're not going to leave you because COVID gave them another year and they can't go to Arizona State or the University of Arizona to play baseball. You've got Ed Ford and Corey Neyland now coming in because they can't go to that four-year school. So what dilemma are your coaches in dealing with this influx of students that are coming in there? I can only have so many baseball players. I can only have so many volleyball players. Has that become a problem in the athletic departments on the community college level in Arizona?
It can be. I mean, believe it or not, you can have too many good players. And we have some programs in our state in some sports that I truly believe they have too many good players. And they can't find playing time for people, and they can't keep people happy. And they, to me, they end up underperforming most of the time, unless they end up with a situation where they go through some injuries, where they have to go further into their depth of their roster and stuff like that. But theoretically, in most sports, after a certain number, if everybody stays healthy, you're going to run with just so many of those, and it's not going to be the whole roster. You're going to run with, maybe seven. To be honest with you, you may run with 7 or 8 basketball players. And if everybody stays healthy and nobody has any issues and they all play well and everything like that, they're going to play. And your other 4 or 5 players might not ever really get much playing time because they haven't proven in practice that they should get more playing time. And they'll keep running with the same people. So, yeah, that can be a problem if you have too many. That's a management of a roster. And I think from a coaching standpoint, you have to manage the rosters so that you have enough in case you have some injury, but you don't have so many that you got people that aren't going to be happy if they're not playing.
But before I do
comes
have to ask this. Go ahead, Jim.
I was going to say everybody comes. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I was going to say everybody tends to come to a 2-year college thinking they should play right away because it's only 2 years. So they're really go ahead.
I've got to ask, just to stay in that vein, because I forgot to ask you when the football program ended, thinking of coaches, where did your football coach go? Did he retire? Is he just an educator now, or is he assisting in other athletic events? I know this is sort of backtracking, but I forgot to ask.
Yeah, no, he actually is our local high school coach at Safford High School right now. Um, and so I'm not sure. He really was looking at some other opportunities at the 2 year level. But when you think about 2 year level football in the NJCAA, you're at 50 some programs, and that's all. So there was some opportunities there, and it didn't work out. So he right now he was coaching the high school program this fall at Safford, and then our other full time assistant. We had a few full time assistants. They landed some other places, but yeah, they basically landed elsewhere. We have one assistant, two assistants that are still here, but they were dorm people. They were resident people in the dorms, so they're still running the dorms. But that most of the other ones found another landing spot. Tough situation, Mark. To be honest with you, tough situation to
I would
go in and
imagine.
tell somebody that we're done. Basically, we're done. You for the most part you've been fired. You can have that feeling as a coach. Say I've been fired. The program's gone away. I mean, for all the right reasons. We couldn't survive keeping the program going. It didn't make sense, and it took its toll on some coaches that had to find something else to do. And
Yeah.
when you're in your mid 50s or 60s and you're trying to find a job, that's a little different world than when you're 30 and looking for a job. You might be able to suck it up and do. You got families, you're established. It's hard to do that when you're young and you can afford to not make much money and work like a dog and do all that and get into the system. Hard to do that again when you're later in years.
I agree.
Jim, could you tell us about your support staff and your other coaches that are there at Eastern Arizona College?
Sure. Support staff outside of our coaches, assistant to me is a event manager and our equipment guy, Mike DeLeo, who's been here longer than I have. I knew Mike from college, and he does a wonderful job. He's a Safford High School grad. He's a local, and he's Eastern Arizona College through and through. But he's done an absolutely great job managing our events and taking care of less to do with equipment now that we don't have football. That was a huge task for him, but just does a wonderful job of getting us ready to play and taking care of our students. We have two full-time athletic trainers, Steve Orm and Kayla Wright, and they take care of our 100+ athletes on a regular basis, whether it's evaluating, treating, rehab, traveling with the teams and stuff like that. So they take care of them. Aside from my secretary, who's the most important person in our whole department, who is absolutely wonderful and does a wonderful job, Shelly Smith. And she's been here now. She's on her 4th year. She's been outstanding. After that, then we have full-time head coaches in a few of our sports and part-time head coaches in others. We're full-time in volleyball, basketball, both basketballs, softball, baseball. We're part-time in tennis, golf, and we do have a cheer program that'll move to competitive cheer this fall, hopefully, because that's now a recognized sport in the NJCAA.
And speaking of playing, and I know we've been looking at your website and that school's website, the conference's website through this, and you guys have done a wonderful job of getting the athletes back on the floor and on the field. What were the protocols in place to get them back playing, and what do you have now, especially for fans, and if you do any live streaming at the events?
Well, we're the only school in the state, the only 2 year school in the state that was on campus this fall and this spring. There's nobody else that's on campus as much as we are. We were full on campus in the fall. We had the opportunity to have online learning, whether it's Zoom. Students didn't have to be here; they could be here, whatever. But we were open for business. Dorms were open. Cafe was open. We gave the opportunity for our athletes to come back in the fall. There was no competitions in the fall. The NJCA moved everything to the spring. We allowed them the opportunity to make, if they wanted to be here, we would have practices and weight workouts and assist with their academic support and everything like that. We had about half of our teams came back. We had women's basketball, volleyball, and softball were back. A few players in softball stayed home. Then we didn't have men's basketball or baseball here. Tennis was here. Golf, half were here. So they had the opportunity to come back, and if they came back, we put them through, all the workouts and practices and everything like that. At Thanksgiving, we sent them all home for the rest of the semester to finish remotely, and that was probably more of a camp. That was also a campus push, for students to go home during a pandemic for 4 or 5 days, be around a bunch of people, and come back on campus. Probably was not the most ideal approach. So we just took it upon our, to say we're going to have the athletes go home and finish up, and we brought them back the weekend of January 16th through 18th. We brought them back to begin practices again. So we really have only been back on campus for 2.5 weeks, and we played our first softball games Tuesday, and we're playing our first basketball games tomorrow night. So, like I said, we're the only ones on.
Oh, yes. Go ahead. I was going to say,
we're the only ones on in person. We're the only ones on in person. I'm sure with what you found out, Maricopa County did not come back to play basketball and volleyball. They decided not to play the indoor sports. So they didn't start practices until February 1st, I believe. And then they're geared up for the outdoor sports. So we have yet to see them. We're playing the other rural outlying schools in basketball and volleyball.
Okay. Mark, do you have one?
Oh, okay. I thought you had another question there, Corey. Jim, when I look at this season coming up, you're playing basketball and softball right now. The other sports that may be right around the corner has got to be baseball, track and field. And volleyball. So that's going to bring. Are you going to have fans at any of these games? Also, I mean, that's the big question for most people.
Oh yeah. Nobody asked me when our students are coming back. If we're going to play games, they want to know if we're going to have fans. Right now for indoor sports, the fans we're having are parents of our players, and no visiting fans. So we've got a list of them. They're going to come in. We're going to screen them, temp test them, and sit them socially distanced in the middle of our bleachers, and let them watch their kids play. But that's what we're going to do. Outdoor-wise, now we didn't get it in place for Tuesday because I didn't get the word on it until Monday, but we're going to allow more than that in outdoor. And really what we're targeting is parents, obviously, but also our students. Allow them to come out, and then our staff and faculty. We will have some community people that want to come, but we're still going to have limited space seating behind home plate with benches spread out and seating like that. So they're really going to have to spread out anyway to watch a ball game outside. Around the fence lines, we've got the squares opened up for air holes in the outfield fence, and I noticed there was 3 or 4 people had a chair and were sitting there watching a softball game through the, I guess you'd call them the knothole gang, watching a softball game through that. So, we want to have fans, Mark, but we also need to follow guidelines to do that, and numbers and spacing and stuff like that. So that could change as the spring goes on, but that's where we are as of today.
And let me just follow up with that, Jim, because the reason I asked, Corey Neyland and I have broadcast community college sports along with Ed Ford. And if I throw Ed in there, now we're going to talk 35 years. I'm taking Ed back to his student years. The following of fans on the community college level has diminished here in California. I mean, you're lucky if you get fans to games. But I got to ask about Arizona, at least in your area. Did you guys used to have the great turnouts, or has it been that dwindling that we have seen here in California, that the enthusiasm for community college sports has slowly disappeared into the night?
I can speak for ours. Our fan base is really good for volleyball and basketball indoors. Outdoor sports is pretty good for baseball, softball. There's just a following for that. So I don't know that I've noticed. It's hard to say a notice in diminished fan participation, because we've had some things happen on campus that's really kind of thrown things for a wrench. A couple of years ago, we had a busted pipe in our gym, and in renovations, we couldn't play our season that year. We couldn't play the end of the spring for basketball and all of volleyball season except for one game. We couldn't play in our gym. So we were playing in the local high school at Thatcher, and so there was a dwindling of fans there. Location, less students because it's off campus. So that's kind of skewed. And then once we got back in, we were able to get back in a year. Well, let's see, the years go by. 2019 for basketball season, and we had two really good basketball seasons and drew really well for that all the way through. And then the pandemic hit, and now we're starting the seasons all over again. But up till that point, no, I don't think we had a dwindling in the fan base there. We've always had a real good fan base, not only students but also community members. In fact, we've always had a good following when we went into the Valley, when we went into the Phoenix area, because we have a lot of alumni over there. Football games, we might have as many people as Glendale Phoenix Mesa has on their side in our stands out there, and the same in basketball. We may have as many people in basketball over there and volleyball watching a game when we're on the road as they do at home. I don't know that their fan bases are great in the Valley. I don't know that they ever really have been. I think Yavapai's had a good fan base. Arizona Western, they all draw a different clientele. Arizona Western and Yuma has a very strong following from the Snowbirds, an older crowd in the Snowbirds. They'll be there early. They'll watch all the games. They're great fans and stuff like that. They probably have much more of that attendance than they do students. And so it's just a matter of where you're located. But we haven't noticed it here. Other places, maybe, I don't know, because I don't go on the road much to see what their fan bases are like.
Then we're breaking it down right to the end. So, Jim, a couple things. For broadcasting, where can we find if these games fans can't get to them? Will there be any broadcasts that they can watch or stream?
Well, we're trying to make an effort to stream everything we can for our fans and for our parents that can't be here. So we at all of our athletic sites for the schools, there's a location there for streaming. They'll have a link that you can go on to stream to watch a streaming. So ours will be streamed tomorrow night. Our men's and women's game will be streamed tomorrow night, and actually the men will be on the radio also locally here. So everybody that I've talked to, even Yavapai is hosting a volleyball tournament this weekend, and they're streaming every game. They've got it set up to have every game streamed. I watched our gals play this morning, but they're streaming every game, even the ones they're not in. And I know all the other schools are making an effort to stream the games because we're not having fans. But those links and those sites are all located on those individual school athletic sites.
As the Eastern Arizona College Director of Athletics and the President of the conference, what's your goals for both moving forward?
For Eastern Arizona College, we've worked really hard this year, and we've been able to do some things to help our programs out with facilities, with some resources and stuff like that. And we want our programs to be successful here at Eastern Arizona College, but we also want to make sure that the student athletes we bring in here have a chance to be successful, most importantly, academically, socially grow while they're here to prepare them for the next level, and then also be successful on the field and on the court. And that's our main goal. And we figure if we can do that and give them the best support, then the positive things of winning seasons and postseasons and trips to regionals and nationals will follow that. And so that's always our goal with all of our sports. Within the conference, it's kind of hard. I mean, I'm president of the conference, but it's not that big of a moniker there. I might have drawn the short straw on that. Who knows? It tends to be that our conference is headed up or run by a handful of people that have been in or that are very interested in the conference, and we have varying levels of people that are involved in this process. So as far as the conference goes, we've got probably some things that we're going to be faced with in the future here as to one would be Maricopa County as to what their goals are for their future, because they work within their district. So they make decisions like they did with football. They make decisions on what they're going to do for their athletic teams and their programs and their schools based on the 10 schools in their district, 9 or 10 schools in their districts. So they make some decisions that can affect us in a large way, but always do affect us. And so I think the future of our conference is really going to be kind of where they're going with what they're doing. We hear all sorts of rumors of, that they're all going to go Division III and no scholarships, and they're just going to play each other, which means they wouldn't play us, or they're going to drop athletics altogether, or they're going to spread their athletics over all the different campuses and have less teams. I mean, you can listen to all the different rumors and everything like that, and that's probably what most of them are, is rumors based on a certain amount of fact. But I think from a conference standpoint, we got to figure out what we're doing as a conference, mainly what Maricopa County's doing, and then more importantly, what all the outliers are doing. Because if they make decisions that affect the outliers greatly, that only leaves about five or six schools, maybe five, that are playing most of the common sports. And then we got to decide, what are we going to do with a 5-team conference? And we're going to play each other 4 and 5 times in basketball, kind of like we're doing in a COVID year because Maricopa County's not involved. So we're playing each other 4 times in basketball. We're playing each other 3 times in volleyball. And, if Maricopa County wasn't involved in baseball, softball, we'd be playing each other 8 times. So we're kind of trying to figure out what everybody's doing here. And that's a big deal in our conference, which way we're going. This conference has had just a proud history of the schools that have been involved in it, the successes they've had, the student athletes that have come through here. And, we have to kind of figure out where we're going in the future here. And COVID kind of threw a real wrench into this, and maybe it threw a wrench into it. Maybe it sped up the process. I don't know. Just because we've been, Maricopa County has gone back and forth, and we're playing, we're not playing. I don't know if you're familiar, but last summer they weren't going to play any athletics for the whole year. And then they changed that, and they said, we're going to pause and we're going to look to the spring and follow the NJCAA. And then they evaluated all fall. And then in November, they said, okay, that's what we're going to do. We're going to continue with that. And then right before school broke at the Christmas break, they made a decision that we're not going to play basketball and volleyball, and we're going to just delay everything till February 1st. So we've kind of, somebody asked me one time, well, do you have a plan B now that Maricopa County's out? And I go, no, actually, we've always had a plan A of what we were going to do as outliers, because we weren't going to base our decisions on Maricopa County and what they were doing. We're going to make sure we had a plan. If Maricopa County decided to come back and play, then we'd make plan B and incorporate them into everything we're doing and in our schedules and stuff like that. So that's that from the conference standpoint. That's a big task for us, figure out where we're going from a conference.
Mark, lastly for Jim.
Well, you know me, Corey. I mean, Jim, I just want to say thank you as an educator and a coach, because Corey Neyland, who's up in the corner there, and Ed Ford and I have sat around and talked about schools caring and districts caring about their student athletes for years, making sure that student athlete has a place to go home at the end of the night when they get done with their classes and or practices. And Corey will tell you to make sure that if they need something to eat, there's food on the table. And I am so impressed with your program and your school. I have to thank a person like you and everybody who works for you, truly caring about the students that come to your school. So thank you. It has been a total pleasure meeting you. And I hope that all the success goes in your direction that you've had through the years until you finally say, hey, enough's enough. It has been a pleasure meeting a true educator and a true head coach and a true national champion, Corey, not for what he did on the field, for what he does for the student athletes.
Thank you very much, Mark. It's been a pleasure to be here. I've really enjoyed visiting with all of you, and the questions and the ability to explain what we're doing over here and how things work. And that's been great. And I really appreciate the opportunity to do that.
All right. So we always end it, though, with one thing. What does our audience need to know about you, or what do you think the audience should know about you, and anything else that you want to say that we may have not even mentioned?
You pretty much covered it. I mean, we talked about our programs, we talked about our students, we talked about our conference and programs in there. No, I think you pretty much covered everything. I mean, we're really excited to be a part of Eastern Arizona College and what's going on here, and we'll continue doing that in the years to come. And we're excited to be a part of our conference because we think it's a great conference competition wise and great opportunity for our students to compete in. And we're just excited to be a part of all that.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Jim. We're excited because we want to have a California Arizona softball thing one day. So we can't wait to broadcast that in the future
Hey,
when that happens.
don't rule that out. Let's work on that. Once we get through this COVID thing, let's think about what we can do with that.
Oh, most definitely. We can do that. So the number one guy in Arizona Community College athletics, Jim Bagnall, thank you for joining us, and we appreciate you. For Mark Pavlovich up in the corner, Ed Ford getting some FaceTime tonight. I am Corey Neyland, and you've been watching the show on SportsNetUSA.net.